Hello, welcome to Gen Z Finance. I'm an older Gen Z here on YouTube documenting my financial journey. Today's video is what I spend in a year as a 23-year-old. I'm going to be reviewing my 2020 spending, saving, and investing for the entire internet to see. If this is your first video of mine, I wanted to give you all some fast facts about me. I do live at my mom's house for cheap, and we'll be going over exactly what those bills look like in a few minutes. I am 2 years post-college. I work full-time in HR, and I have a small part-time job in tutoring, and I live in the Tampa area. For 2020, I had 5 sources of income. I actually had 2 employers for my full-time job this year because I started a new job in April. I am counting the US government as an income source due to the tax return and then the stimulus check I received. This shows the amount of income I earned from 4 of these sources. So for my part-time job, gross, I earned about $2,625. Between my stimulus and my tax return, I received $2,260, $295 in interest and cash back, and $700 from family and friends this year. From my full-time job, between the 2 jobs, you can see the light blue on the bottom. That is from my first job that I had from January until the end of March. And then the dark blue is from the job that I had for the rest of the year. So in total, I brought in about $57,270 from that job. This is an approximation. I'm just using the pay stub for these numbers, and I'm rounding a little bit on my end. So in total, my gross income was around $63,150, and you can see the vast majority of that did come from my full-time main jobs. So while my gross income was around $63,000, I only actually saw $43,000 of that. And this is the number that I have tracked and budgeted in ynab, which is a budgeting software system that I use. We'll talk a little bit more about it in a moment if you're unfamiliar. But that is a difference of about $20,000. That money went to taxes, paycheck deductions, and investing. So things like my health insurance, 401k, things like that. And then margin of error, again, I rounded a lot of numbers. So give or take 1 to 2%, these numbers might be off. All of my spending data comes from ynab. I track every single one of my expenses into a category. If you're interested in seeing more of the software or you've never heard of it before, I have lots of videos on my channel where I show you how I budget my real paychecks every time I get paid. I've used this system since February of 2019, and this is great because I now have almost 2 full years of data in there. That allows me to compare data month to month and year to year, which I'm actually going to be doing in this video. We're going to be looking at my 2020 spending and comparing it to my 2019 spending. And I exported the numbers from this software into a spreadsheet for further manipulation. So I think that is a good introduction into who I am and my 2020 year overall. We're going to jump into that spreadsheet and start looking at my spending. So this is my janky spreadsheet, but it gets the job done, and it was very easy to make, so I like it. Up top, you can see I have the data for both 2019 and 2020. Each year shows the total net income into the system, the total spending for each year in each group and each individual expense line, the monthly average for each group, and the total spending as a percentage of my income, and the total spending as a percentage of all of the spending that happens. I also have a column showing the amount increase or decrease in spending for each category comparing 2019 to 2020. So I'm actually going to hide several of these columns in 2019 because we don't actually need to view them, and I don't want this to get too confusing. So now you can see the total spending for 2019 in each group and category, and then the entire breakdown of 2020. So up top, you can see that in 2019, I only brought in about $28,800 into a ynab compared to the $43,000 I brought into 2020. That is a very big jump. You can see that's a difference of almost $14,000. The reason for this big discrepancy in difference of pay between the 2 years is because in the job that I was working in 2019, which I started at the end of February, I was making $14 an hour to begin with, and then I moved up to $15.50. Then when I changed jobs, I went from $15.50 an hour to $60,000 a year. I also increased my income in 2020 through my part-time job that I started in January. I think we have talked enough about my income. I'm going to focus mainly on this total column for 2020, and I might mention as well what that means percentage-wise for my net income and spending. So in 2020, I spent $3,800 on bills to my mom's. So like I mentioned, I do live at home and I just send my mom $400 every single month, and that covers my car insurance and my phone bill, which I'm still under her name and her plans for, so I cover those. And so that costs about $200 for those two bills, and then the other $200 I just give to her as part of rent and or groceries. So it's $400 a month. Those are my household bills. The monthly average in 2020 is a little bit less than 400 because I didn't start giving her 400 until I got my new job. Before that, I was only giving her 150. In subscriptions, I spent $476.36 for the entire year. That makes up about 1.1% of my total net income. You can see here are all the subscriptions I had. There were some subscriptions in 2019 that I didn't have in 2020, and then some subscriptions in 2020 that I didn't have in 2019. Overall, I actually spent $2.18 less on subscriptions in 2020 than I did in 2019. So for monthly varied, this includes things like gas, dining out, other, and fun. I spent $780. The biggest change here was comparing my gas from 2020 to 2019. You can see I spent less than $100 in gas in 2020, and that is because I have not driven my car since March of 2020. So that was definitely one positive of the coronavirus, as I saved over $470 on gas. Dining out, I spent about $80 more. Still only made up 0.5% of my net income. Other such miscellaneous could be anything. I could be buying books on Amazon, something off of Etsy for myself. I bought a couple of Taylor Swift albums during the year, and that came out of other. It's just fun, miscellaneous, anything money. So for giving, I have 4 categories. I have gifts, so this is gifts to family and friends, donations to a GoFundMe, or a random charity drive, or I did a lot of donations to Feeding America this year, I know, so things like that. And then family giving is any extra monetary giving that I give to specific family members. So in 2020, I definitely gave a lot more than I did in 2019, over $1,000 more, and this is in red because I gave more in 2020, but I'm not mad at this. I'm actually really happy that I gave a lot more. In total, I gave 3.76% of my net income, and giving made up 5.85% of my total spending. So these are 2 different numbers because I don't spend all of my net income. We skipped over it, but if I come back up here, you can see I only spent about 64% of my net pay. So the rest of that I saved. So the $1,600 I spent on giving in 2020 made up 3.7% of my net income, but it's made up 5.85% of my total spending for the year. I am sort of happy with 1.4% of my net income going to donations and not just to like gifts or family, because in 2020 I think I was budgeted for $20 a month, and then as you can see by my monthly average, I actually averaged out about $50 a month, which I'm happy that I'm giving more and I'm finding areas in my budget to pull money from to give more to, but I definitely want to keep increasing this every year. Next, I have my sinking funds. So in 2020, I spent $2,827 in sinking funds. Again, that is over $1,600 more than 2019. But the main reason this happened is because you can see here I have $2,245 in electronics. I bought a new iPhone and a new MacBook for me this year. This was budgeted spending. I knew it was most likely going to happen that I would need a new iPhone. My old iPhone I had for 4 years, and I'm pretty happy with that lifespan. And my old MacBook I had for about 5.5 years. So starting about midway through 2020, I started saving specifically for those 2 new purchases, and I had all of the money saved up to pay them in full. Otherwise, I spent a lot less in car maintenance, which is great, $200 compared to almost $700. I spent less money in clothing, and then I started a travel/vacation fund, and I did manage to get away for 1 weekend in 2020. I went down to the Florida Keys, and the trip cost me $65. Now to the fun stuff. You can see in 2020, I spent almost $10,000 on student loans. And that was all I had left. I am officially debt free. You can see in 2019, I spent a lot more. I started 2019 with $28,000 in debt. And so between the 2 years, I paid them off in full. But 2019 was my year to really focus on debt. And starting 2020, I only had about that $10,000 left. So this made up 23% of my net income and close to 36% of my total spending for the year. I'm not necessarily happy with how much I sent to debt in 2020 because ideally I would not have had to send any to debt, but I am happy that I paid off my student loans, and I'm really happy that I went really hard in 2019 because that allowed me to focus on other financial goals in 2020. So this next category, I called it cost of working, and this is where I specifically tracked how much it cost me to park downtown, where my previous job was located in downtown, and I had to pay to park there every single day. And then I also tracked how much I spent on the tolls to work. I had to take a toll to work and a toll back to work. And you can see in 2019, I spent almost $700 trying to get to work. In 2020, I spent less than $200, and this is because I switched jobs. And then even if I hadn't switched jobs, it still would have probably only been about $200 because I would have been working from home anyway. So overall, I spent $530 less in 2020. This is just a one-off section. I had a speeding ticket in 2019 for $462. I am very happy that I did not have a speeding ticket in 2020, so I spent nothing on that category. And finally, the last section we have is my investments. You can see in 2019, I had no investments towards either my Roth IRA or a brokerage account. I was not investing in 2019. My focus was solely on these student loans, for better or worse. You can see in 2020, I actually invested $7,950 of my net income. This isn't tracking what I was able to put into investments through my 401k or HSA or anything like that. This is just what I invested after the fact. So $6,000 went into my Roth IRA to max it out, and then I was able to put $1,950 to my taxable brokerage account, which I was really happy about because I didn't even open this account until I think August. So I moved some money around and moved some money out of some cash and sinking funds to be able to fund this brokerage account a little bit more towards the end of 2020. So in total, investments took up 18.5% of my net income, or 28% of my total spending. And so down here is the summary of everything. So in total, in 2020, I spent $27,605.77. Taking my net income of $43,000 minus what I spent in total of $27,000, I had a net gain of $15,416.41. So again, I spent about 64% of my take-home pay, and I saved 35% of my take-home pay. However, this calculation of my yearly spending does include the $7,000 I sent into investments as an expense. So I really saved more than 35%, but it's counting this almost $8,000 as an expense. So that's why I have this line, totals without debt or investing. So if I take this $27,000 and subtract the almost $8,000 I spent on investments and almost $10,000 I spent on debt, I only spent about $9,670 on all of my expenses. That means I had a net gain. So this is the money that I either just saved and kept in cash, saved and invested, or sent to debt, $33,350, which makes up 77.5% of my total net income. In some of my previous videos, if you've seen any of them, you might have heard me say I spent less than $10,000 in 2020, and this is the number that I am referring to, the total that I spent, not including money sent to debt or investments. And you can compare these yearly totals to 2019. So in 2019, I spent in total $24,700, which meant that out of the, $28,000 that I brought in 2019, I did not spend $4,050 of it. However, if I look at just the expenses, not including my investing or debt, I only spent $5,300 in 2019. I spent less than $5,500 in 2019. That is crazy. So obviously between 2019 and 2020, there was some lifestyle inflation. Some of that just was an increase in the monthly bills that I was sending to my mom every month. 100% it would not be possible for me to have spent as little as I did or saved as much as I did in either 2019 or 2020 if I was not living at home. That is without a doubt the truth. And something I wanted to mention in case you didn't know, in total I had $28,000 in student loans, but $17,000 of that was actually my mom's Parent Plus loans. So part of the deal with me living at home for so cheap was that I would take over all of her student loan payments as well. So that was an understanding that we had, that I could live at home for cheap, and I would take over her student loan payments. So I'm not completely mooching off of her. She was a willing participant in this. Lastly, this bottom row here just shows my total yearly investments, and in 2019 I did not invest anything, but in 2020 I invested about $19,000. But if I take that $19,000, that works out to about $1,500 a month, and that sounds about right to me. And if you did not know, I do have a goal to invest $30,000 in 2021, so please make sure you're subscribed to my channel so you can follow along on my journey as I update y'all on my progress towards that goal. And finally, to help wrap up this video, I wanted to take you inside of ynab and show you one of the reports that I have courtesy of the Toolkit for ynab extension. It is this income breakdown. The reason I like this report is I like the chart/graph it shows. So this is all of my income and then all of my spending for the entire year of 2020. You can see the percentage of my income. So my first employer for the year that I had from January to March, that made up about 20% of my total income, and then my new job made up about 66.5% of my total income. Here is this net gain that I talked about, that $15,000 that I did not spend from everything that I brought in. Here are my student loans, my investments, my sinking funds, my bills that I paid to my mom, my monthly varied subscriptions, and then the very thin line down there is the cost of working. So this is just a visual representation of what we already talked about. I also wanted to show this net worth graph in case you haven't seen any of my videos before. I do a net worth update every single month, but this shows how my net worth progressed in those 12 months. By the end of January of 2020, I had a net worth of negative $3,000, and by the end of December of 2020, that was up to $42,870, which did account for about a $46,000 increase in net worth. If you are interested to know where this $15,000 and the $4,000 that I did not spend in 2019 went in my budget, I highly recommend that you check out this video that I'll link up above. It's when I took all of the ending balances for my 2020 budget and put them into my new ynab template for 2021. That had the $19,000 that I had in cash, and I rebudgeted that and showed you where it went inside of my savings. Otherwise, I think that's going to be it for this video. Let me know down below if you have any questions about my spending for 2020 or for 2019. I hope you all have enjoyed this video. As always, I hope y'all are having a good day and that you're staying safe and healthy.